And this is tough because the whole notion of our organism and how it's working on the hierarchy of the physical world, so to speak, physical elements, it's all geared for survival. And your mind is functioning according to millions and millions and millions of years of evolution. And it's geared to guarantee, as best as possible, your survival and reproduction and the production of your offspring. That's all it cares about. All the rest of it is just fringe. It's just fringe. So that's what it's trying to do. And so all of our perceptual systems are constructed in a way to allow that to occur, so that we can identify the right things to mate with, so that we can identify enemies or things that could eat us. That's all the mind has evolved through dependent origination to function as. It's a survival machine that reproduces. That's its fundamental functionality. That's what it's doing. That's what the mind is doing as well. So your normal mental experience is completely predetermined, so to speak, by this evolutionary drive to survive. And it's extremely sophisticated hardware and software in here, the brain, and what it does and how it's plugged into this. Now, we're only talking the hierarchy of the body. We're not talking about the subtle body and quantum consciousness and all that. We're just kind of talking the earthy level, the stuff we can actually feel and touch and do experiments with and say, yeah, it's like this, it's like this. It's kind of like Newtonian physics. It all works, but only up to a point. Then it starts to fail. So this is a provisional level of understanding that I'm describing now. But it still is exactly what's going on at this level. So, what you're seeing now, this is the thing that's going to, it'll be entertaining to you perhaps if you don't already know this for a little while, but then it goes back as though you never learned it today, if you've never heard what I'm going to be sharing with you today. It's going to go back in the same old stupid way of looking at things. It's really a stupid way of looking at things because it avoids the reality. It's like believing the earth is flat in spite of all of the science. It's like, what is it? Going with Galen instead of Harvey in terms of blood circulating or pooling. So, let's get right down to it. This is neuroscience. We have a neurologist here. Hopefully he'll concur. But I've had actual professors of neuroscience in my retreats who have assured everybody in the group what I'm about to tell you is as best as science, neuroscience knows. And there's no real argument with it. What you're seeing, what you're experiencing, like this Jackson here, this hologram, I'm just going to use the language of this hierarchy. I won't paint it in a magical way. At this level of hierarchy of experience, eyes cannot see, but we have the way our eyes and the way our perceptual system is working. It's as though we have little windows here, and there's a spiritual entity inside that's looking out these windows of the eyes, like camera lenses, okay? And if you can't see clearly, you put glasses here, and now the images are made clear. So this is how people have always looked at it, and it's how the Tibetans look at it, is that you're seeing out of your eyes, as though your eyes can capture objects, and can see forms, and can see this. But we know neurologically that's completely wrong. Your eyes can't see any better than your hands, or your elbows, or your toes, or your belt, or your shoes, because eyes can't see anything. They are not seers. They're not cameras. All they are is receivers of electromagnetic energy called photons. So photons come in, they come to the back of the eye, the retina, and they hit the cones and the rods, which are the cellular structures that they then get absorbed into. And if there's a lot of light, a lot of photons are coming in and hitting these cones and rods. As the photons are hitting the cones, now there's no pictures coming in, there's just photons. That's a little pixel of light, so to speak. It's not even that, but we'll use that, a corpuscle of light hitting those rods and cones. That triggers an electrochemical reaction in the rods and cones, which causes an electrochemical reaction to stimulate the nerves in the rods and cones, that then moves forward into or backwards, up into the optic nerve. And each eye has an optic nerve that connects it to the occipital cortex in the back of the brain. So when a photon hits, it makes an electrochemical reaction because the energy of the photon is absorbed, and that energy is what's triggering the energetic pulse of an electrochemical reaction moving along the nerves through the optic nerve to the back of the brain. Now, if we could look at what's moving backwards through the optic nerve to the back of the brain, if we could look at it with a microscope and we can narrow down really clearly along the optic nerve, going from the back of the eye to the occipital cortex, what would we see if we could see small enough to see what is it that's moving back? Because we know if we cut the optic nerves, there's no vision. So there's something going back there. And it has to get back there into the occipital cortex, or else you get no vision. You don't see what's out there. So if we cut those things, we've interrupted the flow of something. So what is it that's flowing back there? So we get down there with a microscope and we look at that line moving back from the eyeballs to the occipital cortex, and we open up the side of the head and we look inside. And what we will see would be just chemicals interchanging, ions interchanging in the neurons. We don't see any pictures. If you're looking at an elephant, we don't see little elephants moving up the optic nerve. There's not even a movie, there's not even a little digital pixelation of an elephant moving up. All it is electrochemical exchanges taking place in the neurons. Going from neuron through synapse to the neuron and moving up like that. And what started moving here in the beginning at the eye, it's not the same thing that even makes it halfway up the optic nerve, because it's just an electrochemical exchange that stops here, which starts the next part of it, which starts the next part of it. So there's nothing that's originally from the eye that's moving along the optic nerve. It's just a chain reaction. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So there's no pictures. If it's the elephant that you're looking, your eyes are focused on an elephant, there's no elephant pictures in any way encoded in any of that stuff that you can look and say, oh, there's the little picture of the little elephant moving along the optic nerves. So when these electrochemical signals make it to the back of the brain, those little signals are processed. 1/3 or more of your brain is totally dedicated to generating the pictures you're seeing. That's the occipital cortex. It's really a complex process involving Fourier transforms and holography and all of these things that allow this three-dimensional hologram, is what you're seeing, to occur. So the point is, the eyes don't see anything. See, they're not seeing images. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. They can't see images. They don't have a capacity to do that. They're not video cameras that are sitting here. All they are is passive receivers of photons, not pictures. They're not receiving pictures. The pictures are assembled in the back from these electrochemical signals. Those electrochemical signals are assembled and processed in such a way that that's information. So what the photons really are doing, their impact is producing a type of information, not pictures. That information in the electrochemical exchange is coming to the back of the occipital cortex. That information, it's a type of information that's then being processed. So the occipital cortex is like an information processor. And it's taking those signals, that information, and it's transforming electrochemical signals into geometric three-dimensional representations of that information. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing that information converted through Fourier transforms, which have to do with how you transform certain types of information into a holographic formations, structures, and it's being transformed into that. So that same information is what you're experiencing, but it's been rendered in a geometric three-dimensional version of that same information. So you're not seeing what's out there. You're seeing the brain's assemblage of that information and rendering it into colors, formations, and all of that.
That last part, definitely. That rendering of the, that part.
So this is all rendered. So what you're seeing is a rendering, a holographic. Why do I say holographic? Because it's holographic. As far as our experiences, it's three-dimensional, and you can experience in deeper meditation that it's transparent. You can see through this. Sometimes on acid you can see through it. I remember one time in 1968 in Hawaii. There's a lot of stories I can tell you. But I did some acid that was cut with mescaline. And we were out on this beach at the sunrise. And it was an incredible experience to talk about synchronicity. And everybody saw the same thing. The sun rose over, I think it was Cocoa Head or Diamond Head. We were out away from the section of Waikiki out on the other beach, and it looked like it was rising out of the volcano with like the crescent moon there, and then the star of Venus was above. It was like this alignment. But anyway, I'm walking along the beach. And everything was just perfect, just beautiful, just beautiful sand, beautiful water, and everything is there. And I was thinking, wow, this seems a little bit kind of like transparent, almost like it's a painting kind of thing. And I kind of went like this, and it split open, and there was nothing on the other side. So it's kind of like putting it back. But it gave me the sense that this is just like a transparent hologram. It's like I could push on it. And it would go, whoa, 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 whoa. And I could go like this, and it would open. And on the other side was absolutely nothing. Just nothing was there. So I closed that. That's kind of this experience that you can also have in meditation, particularly when the Kundalini, which we'll do a Kundalini practice tonight, where you bring the Kundalini and it comes and it enters into the crown chakra for the first time, and it gives a shot up into the crown chakra. There's a state of indescribable non-duality, and the experience is like this is a transparent hologram. There's just no doubt about it. So anyway, you have what you're seeing now is only occurring inside your brain. Your experience is though you think you're looking at a common Jackson and everybody's looking at this common Jackson. No, this is an assemblage of information that's assembled and it's occurring in your brain behind your forehead, but it's looking as though you're looking out at something that's objective. So the image you're seeing here is all your own projection, just like a dream. Just like a dream, except it's being produced from the data feed coming in through the eyes and the optic nerves, which is then being processed in the occipital cortex. So everything you're seeing, we know also colors don't exist in nature. They only exist in the brain. They are colorating. So all of the things you're seeing with the different colors, those are all being colorated as just a freebie for all of us. It's just a freebie. All the colors. So we know nature doesn't have colors, and the image we're seeing only exists on this side of the front of your skull. So you're seeing a movie inside your skull. We won't talk yet about who's watching the movie. That's coming up. Just eat your popcorn. And so this movie is occurring on the inside of your skull, and it seems as though that's the world out there. But it's a representation of information based on the photons that are coming, that are being processed. And there's lots of ways to test this. Because there are certain neurological dysfunctions that people have after a stroke or maybe a tumor or something, where some people see everything exactly the same way we do, but in slow motion. Because the timing factor in the brain isn't working properly. And so it's seeing everything moving in slow motion. Which means the stuff that's going on out there doesn't have a time frame that's independently existing onto itself. It's being, the time frame and the way it's being done is attempting to approximate what's out there, but it's never identical. Well, first of all, the colors, there's no colors in nature. All those colors are being added in as part of the way to help differentiate for survival purposes. Otherwise we wouldn't have colors. Dogs we know see mostly gray, but they have greater ability of sound and of smell, far more sensitive than ours. So there's a compensation there. They don't need to see colors. And it's not that they're not seeing the colors that are there, oh poor dog. Their brain isn't producing colors and ours is. When you're asleep at night and you're in a dream, you see colors beautifully and so forth. Those aren't coming from your eyes. They have nothing to do with your eyes. You could be watching a beautiful sunset in your dream and it's the bright sun. It's not coming from the sun. Where's that bright light coming from? Your brain is producing it. When you look out now outside at the sun, do you think you're seeing the sun? No. You're seeing the brain's producing what looks like a sun that's very bright. You've never seen the sun. And here's where it gets really cool. This is where it starts to even get more creepy. If we took, you see the light that you're seeing that looks like it's bright sunlight, light is invisible. It's not bright. It has no bright quality to it. It's invisible in physics. Light is invisible. It's not bright. And the absence of light isn't dark. And I'll explain that to you. Getting unraveled. It always happens around this point. It's unraveling. If we take a shoebox, shoebox, and we cut a hole out on this long end and a hole on this long end, and we cut a hole along the side here so we can look into the shoebox. And the room is completely black, dark. And we have a laser beam, and we shoot it through, and it makes no contact with the box because the hole is big enough. The laser beam can shoot through and come through and go out the other side. And you're looking in the box. And the room is completely dark. The box is dark. And we shoot the powerful laser beam. You've seen lasers. They're bright, right? Yeah. We shoot the laser beam. You wouldn't see anything. Because light is invisible. It's not bright. It has no brightness to it. If that laser beam hit the side of the shoebox, you would see brightness. Because the photons are bouncing off and hitting your eyes, and then your brain is producing brightness. Because there's no brightness in the universe. There's no color and there's no brightness. If you look up at the sun, there's no bright sun there. Because sunlight is invisible. All light is invisible. It's not visible. Visibility is something that's produced in the brain as a description of how it processes light. So it's not colorful out there and it's dark as hell. There's no brightness out there, so to speak. That's all being generated in the brain, that quality. Now let's go on to sound. This is really cool. Sound is, let's say there's a bell tower over there in the church, and the bell is ringing, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. What's happening is when the bell is being gonged, the air molecules around the bell are being disturbed, and they're being pushed from the gonging. It's creating a sound wave, and the sound wave isn't a wave of sound. It's simply a wave moving through the air molecules in motion that then come and make contact with your eardrum. Now there's still no sound coming. There's no ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong coming through the air. that's hitting your eardrum, and there's a little microphone in there that goes, okay, we got some sounds coming, Joe. Get ready to process. No, there's nothing coming. It's like the photons. There's no sound being conducted in that. It's just like your radio. We turn on our radio function or our TV function, and we'll get the signal. The signal's all around us all the time. But we're not hearing the music, right? But the music is encoded in these waves, in radio waves, which are electromagnetic field waves. All of that information is being sent, but there's no images being sent. There's no TV shows floating through the air that you have to kind of grab. It all has to be decoded. It's just wave frequencies. So likewise, in sound, there's no sound, there's no ding-dong coming, and when the eardrum is being vibrated, the nerves are being stimulated, and just like with your eyes and the optic nerves, those nerves that are being affected electrochemically, and there's an electrochemical exchange taking place moving up the nerves to the area where those sounds are being processed. If again, we could open up the side of the head and observe where those nerves are going to where that sound is being processed, and we could look close, and with microphones close up, we wouldn't hear any little ding-dong, ding-dong, ding-dong moving up towards the sound processing part of the brain. There's no sound moving along the nerves. Do you understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Nerves do not conduct sound. They only conduct electrochemical neuronal exchanges, ionization, and various other phenomena that are occurring. But there's no sounds occurring that are moving upwards. Just like there's no pictures moving up the optic nerve. They're generated internally. That means there's no sound in the universe. The universe is completely quiet. It's completely still. Because sounds are generated in a brain. They don't exist in nature. So when somebody's playing a musical instrument, there's no sound coming out of it. When you go listen to an orchestra, there's no sound coming from the orchestra. All there is moving air molecules. It's perfectly silent. This is neuroscience. I've done these twice with different neuroscientists who are professors of neuroscience, and they said, Jackson, that's exactly correct. There's no sounds out there. There's no colors out there. Light is not bright. This is all being manufactured. And so the hologram, I call it hologram, the hologram experience that you are experiencing is completely manufactured in your brain, and it's occurring in your brain. You with me? You understand? And to people to hear this, it seems like it's radical. It's not radical, it's just neuroscience. It's not like there's an option, folks. Your neurology doesn't allow plan B. Your neurology doesn't allow plan B. That's the only option. And there's no competing theories. It's not like string theory where there's competing theories. There's no competing theories, and there's no real gaps in the process, except the neurologists or the neuroscientists don't understand the aspect of consciousness itself, but they do understand all of this. That's easy, because you can modify those nerves and so forth and completely change the sounds and completely change the colors and the experiences. Because people with strokes and different brain tumors and stuff experience really strange things, because those settings that produce a more consistent human experience are messed with. If you mess with those, you get a different type of experience. Like schizophrenics with hallucinations and stuff, there's stuff that's not working right. And when we mean right, giving us the consistent imagery that we call human experience. So, there's no colors out there, there's no brightness out there, and there's no sounds out there. The surround sound movie that you're experiencing is completely occurring in your brain, this side of your skull. And so what seems like it's occurring out there is how it's being projected in here to seem as though it's occurring on the other side of your eyes. Isn't that cool? And what's really cool about this, I think this is so creepy cool. I was reading this one, I think it was a psychologist, what would you call a neuroscientist, psychologist, brain psychologist, what would you call that guy?
Neuropsychologist.
He focuses on the mental aspects of the neurology of the brain.
Neuroscience.
Neuroscience, well, it's whatever. Anyway,
Brain doctor.
this guy, brain doctor. This guy talked about what's really cool if you see there is a quantum electromagnetic field and all of these fields, a quantum field that's out there, so to speak. So to speak. We'll give it a certain amount of reality for this conversation. And what's interesting is even though this thing that's being held here in what seems to be my hand, even your hand, you look at your hand, that is simply something that's being manufactured in your brain to look like a hand. You're not seeing your hand. You can't. Eyes can't see anything. You can't see your hand because eyes don't see anything. What are you seeing? An image produced in your brain that it's convincing you is what is your hand. But you can't see your hand. All you can see is this image that's being produced in the brain. But what's really interesting, either with this or that, when you go to touch this, the stuff that's actually out there, like the electromagnetic field that's making contact with the retina, or it's making contact with the eardrum, that stuff that has no colors and it has no sound and it has no brightness, that stuff, when you go to touch it, the projection that your brain is doing is projecting it exactly where that stuff is. Do you understand that? It's subtle. All right, so information is coming into your eyes, right?
Yeah.
Then and it's coming, the information we could say is real. It's photons are coming into your eyes. And they're reflecting off of this stuff, this stuff here. They're reflecting off of this stuff. Our eyes can't see this stuff, because this is the stuff that's really out here. The photons are bouncing off of it, so to speak, and hitting your retina. Then an image is being produced of what's hitting your retina, the photons, and then this is what you're seeing, right? But you're not really seeing what's here. You're seeing simply what the brain is representing as what it thinks is out here and represents like this. But the brain's representation of what it thinks is out there is occurring exactly on the space of where the stuff that's really out there is. How cool is that? The mechanism of how the projection of an inner brain experience can lap it over the stuff that it's trying to represent. We're not seeing what's really here, we're only seeing the brain's representation of it. And this is all occurring in our brain, not out here.
Jackson, I don't know if this would help the discussion at this point or not. Have you heard the one about, like, if you wear reversing goggles that reverse the light so everything on the right is on the left? It's very confusing to a person, but after 3 days, you can't tell the difference. You're back to normal.
Well, let me expand on that. When I was in grade school, it must have been about 5th grade, we saw a movie in health class. And in the movie, it was, like a 1950s movie. In the movie, they had children put on glasses that looked like little binoculars. And when they put them on, it would turn the world upside down. You could see everything upside down. You wear it for about a day or so, and the brain will turn everything upside right. It will correct the image. You take the glasses off, and now with no glasses, everything's upside down.
For less than a day, the rehabilitation would be quicker than the original.
We have a neurologist here correcting our timing. Thank you. That's a really excellent point. It's showing that couldn't be, if you're really seeing what's out there, you couldn't then flip it and see it upside down. How would that work? So you are seeing a brain-produced image that's being produced in the brain. Now, this is what I'm talking about, deconstructing what you think is reality and what we're supposed to be thinking in evolution. So we got a movie going on inside our skull. And what you're seeing is actually taking place inside your skull. And nobody is seeing what the other person is seeing, because each person's experience of the world is being independently produced cinematically in their own skull. And it's being always produced from different photons. that are hitting the retina at different angles. We're not even sharing the same photons, right? Because the photons that are hitting my retina aren't going out again and then hitting your retina. So you're having your own photons hitting your retinas, and then you're producing your own movie. And so we're all producing our own movie. And it's completely independent of everybody else's movie. And it's being constructed from photons that none of us are sharing. That's kind of like a real solipsism, isn't it?
What's a solipsism?
Solipsism is that everything you're experiencing and seeing is only in your own mind, and there's nothing else there in reality other than what you're experiencing in your own mind. We can avoid the solipsism, but yes.
I'd like to ask you a question on the sound. I grew up in a family that, a music family, and I used to do band work, different jazz, classics. Now this is the one part that I always found absolutely astounding, is that in jazz, when you were improvising, now invariably what used to happen is that it took a little while, and then whoever the musicians were would fall quiet within themselves, just through the listening of the music. And then when it came to a solo, for example, from your side, you somehow picked up on what had been put there, the sound that had arisen, and you heard beforehand what came out. So for example, at that stage when I was playing double bass, string bass, I could hear what I was going to play. So I first heard it, then my fingers went to the different parts of the bass, and it went there, and went there, and it went, and then I heard the sequence that was coming, and as I heard it, that's where it came. So it sounds like Susan Pun, but it sounds like this is what you're talking about. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it would be that my kind of understanding of what you're saying is it'd be like hearing music in a dream. It's like hearing music in a dream. You're hearing the music, if the brain is producing the music, it's being produced in the dream without an instrument. And then you could play that music with an instrument.
Yes.
So the music is only being produced in the brain. There's no music that you're listening to out there, because the music is created in the brain, because there's no sounds out there. You see, there's no sounds in the world. It's all silent. If a bomb goes off, there's no that is created in the brain from the rapid movement of the air molecules hitting the eardrum. But there's no sound other than the sound that the brain makes. And it makes the sounds that we hear and the colors we see all for kind of survival reasons. You could find how those particular sounds became those sounds if you traced it back through dependent origination, why we hear those sounds the way we are, the way they're, the qualia, the quality of those experiences have a history and why they sound. Okay, so everybody's on track with this with me? You understand you cannot really, I mean, you could try, but I wouldn't be the one you would argue it with. You could argue that that's not true, but neurologically and brain-wise, you can't get around it. Because we can see the corollaries of all of these perceptual functions in brain activity through brain scans and EEG, and taking very large numbers of people who have had brain tumors, or they have had strokes and different things, or brain injuries from car accidents, and they lose certain perceptual capacities that other areas of the brain may take over and fix and make it okay. But they can lose some of these features. There's what's called hysterical blindness. The optic nerves and everything works, but the occipital cortex is not generating any pictures. There's nothing neurologically seeming the matter, but somehow it's not producing pictures. So there's all these different things. Here's another interesting one. There's lots of these examples, but this is one that I remember well. It struck me. Can't remember his name, but I think it was around 1958 or 1960. I used to remember his name. He was one of the first of these mass murderers. He climbed up this tower at Texas University, and he started shooting people. I think he killed 12 people. And he was one of the top mathematics students, graduate student. Bright guy, had a wife, children, happy guy, everything was great. And he left a note. I remember reading it in the newspaper. He left a note and said, "There is something the matter in my brain. When you find me dead, please make sure they do an autopsy on my brain." And they found he had a massive brain tumor. He couldn't control the behaviors that were being dictated due to the brain tumor screwing it up. He said, "I can't stop myself." And he couldn't even tell anybody about it, just left it as his note, and he would end up being killed up there. All of that behavior activity was being dictated by this malfunctioning. Here's what I really love. There was a family, these are actual medical stories. There was a family whose mother, the mother in the family, these were older children, the mother started out of the blue. They'd never gone to church. They'd never had any religious experience in their lives. The mother was completely agnostic and not interested. All of a sudden, she started going to the local church. And at first, they didn't realize that she was going every day. Every morning, she was going to the church. And they asked her, they said, what is going on? She said, "Well, if you don't understand that God is the most important thing in your life and that Jesus will save you and so forth, that you're not understanding life or any of this." And she was really into it and going every day to church. But her behavior was so out of character. And it wasn't like philosophically based, like she had studied and read and came to this realization and this insight and accepted Jesus into her life and all this stuff. It wasn't following any kind of logical mode of any kind. So they went to the family doctor and said, "There's something the matter with Mom. She's going to church." And he said, oh, there must be a problem. I mean, it'll be like that in the future. People go to church and go, So anyway, he said, "Well, bring her on in." So they came in and he checked out and so forth. And he said, "We need to get a brain scan done and so forth." And they found out that she had a fairly good-sized tumor in her brain. They were able to operate on it and took it out. She never went to church, never thought about God.
Even the brain was gone.
So any of your friends that are like in a cult and so forth go, "Brain tumor, brain tumor." Probably. Anyway, so that's what's going on. The whole thing is a construction that's occurring inside. This is again on this hierarchy, this level of understanding. That's what's taking place. And these hierarchies, meaning the spiritual, the subtle body, and the Rigpa and Dharmakaya, all of that stuff is all integrated. But it doesn't take out the earth element aspects. It doesn't void it. It just brings clarity to understanding what's happening and how this phenomenon is occurring. So now here's the interesting part. Who's watching the movie? This is the brain movie. Everything you see my hands move, every person is making their own movie of their own Jackson moving his hands. And of his voice. You're making the voice. Have you ever seen that thing on YouTube where it's a particular neurological experiment that's done to where the person can say bark, bark, bark.
Yes.
And the other one is saying dog, dog, dog. If the person mouths bark, but they have the video saying the sound is coming out dog, but the person's going, the close-up is going bark, bark. But the sound coming out of the video is dog, dog. Well, you can't say dog and go bark, bark, right? But they changed it so that the person is lipping and saying bark, bark, but they make the sound that's actually coming that you're hearing when the person's going bark, bark, dog, dog. So they're taking a sound stream and mixing it with the video so that the person is going bark, but the sound is coming out dog. okay? You watch the video, and you can watch this 1,000 times and it's always the same. You go back and forth, and you play the video, and you're looking at the person's mouth, and the person, what you're hearing clearly is bark, 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 bark. Turn your head away from the video and you hear dog, dog, dog,
That's good.
dog. You look at the face and it goes bark, bark,
It's because
bark. Because the brain takes the movement of the mouth as being the real clue as to what the sound should be manufactured as. So it manufactures the sound of bark, bark, bark with a voice, and ignores the sound that you're really hearing through your ears is blocked. So all you actually are producing is the sound bark, bark, bark. Now if that leaves any doubt in your mind that this is other than a projection that
There's
the
a
brain
new
is
one.
producing.
Have you seen the Yanni
Uni Laura.
Laurel?
No.
You gotta go to YouTube and you gotta go and just go or
No,
Google
that
Yanni
works
Laurel.
with, frequency.
Yeah.
It's exactly.
It's a sound and everyone hears either one or the other word. So some people hear it that it's saying Laurel, and some people hear it saying Yanni, and that is what they hear, and there's no way that they're hearing a different one.
That's a cool one. So this one that I think it's called the McGurk effect. McGurk effect. You can look it up on the YouTube. It is so cool. It's like, it makes no sense, right? It makes no sense. But that's how this is working. So now we have to understand, this is the movie. We're each making our own movie, and it's occurring inside this side of your skull. You're not seeing stuff out there. It seems though, because it's being projected as though it's out there. Really precisely projected out there over the stuff that's really out there that we never see or experience. So who is it that's watching the movie? And where is that one in there that's watching this movie? It's like you're in a movie theater and you're sitting in the chair, and here's the whole movie. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing the movie of Jackson, and the movie is also has the audio of his voice. All of that's being produced in your brain. That's the movie. Who is watching the movie? Where is it? What is that that's watching the movie? This is a brain twister, literally. Who is watching the movie?
Consciousness.
Well, let's look at a dream. When you're in a dream and you're looking at tigers running after you, and you're climbing a tree and you're looking at the tigers clawing at the tree, who is it that's looking at the tigers? Is it really you in a dream body, looking out the eyes of the dream body that actually function? Who's looking at the tigers? See, the subconscious is projecting you looking at the tigers, and what that view would look like is if there was really a you there looking at the tiger. That's what the subconscious is projecting. You follow? Mm-hmm. It's as though you were really there looking at the tiger. It's producing that movie from the perspective as though you were really an entity with real eyeballs looking at real tigers climbing on a real tree. So when you're in a dream, that's how it's being produced, as though there's a real you there looking at or being chased by tigers. And all the perspectives you're seeing are being produced from the different perspectives, as though you are seeing from that perspective. So, but now, who is in there watching this movie, this Jackson movie? And as many people as there are in here, those are that many Jackson movies that are produced fully with cinematography and sound, and all of that is occurring in colors and certain brightness and probably a certain magnificence. And so that's what this movie is. But who's watching that movie? See, this is, now we're going to cut really into the core of the emptiness of self. There's no one in there watching the movie. The brain is producing a simulation of as though there's someone watching that brain movie. Creepy?
It's
appearing, Miss Jackson?
What?
Only appearing, Miss Jackson.
Yeah, it's appearing as
Awareness.
however it's constructing it. Well, no, we're not going into awareness hierarchy yet. We're staying just with the brain hierarchy.
In the TV show.
The TV show, the hierarchy of the brain, because we can track all of this neurologically. We can find all of the corollaries of where this seems to hold true clearly. We're not getting into what is consciousness. We're just staying with this neurological experience. It's neurological. So this self that's watching this movie, that the brain can produce that self to think it's a soul, a spirit, a self, an identity, an ego, a good person, a bad person, an angel, a rigpa, a self with a big S, a witness. It can be projecting it at any kind of nuance of information that it's taken in, conditioning. So just like in your dreams at night, you can be any kind of character, typically though with the same body, but you can be in any kind of emotional state, any kind of adventure possible that the brain is producing. Likewise, that's what's occurring here. The self that seems to be who you are watching the movie is simply a production of the neurons firing in a certain pattern.
So if you're going to a game reserve to look at animals, then you must ask yourself, who's watching the animals?
No, you must ask yourself. I know no one is, and it's perfectly
Just an
okay.
experience of watching animals.
Yes, it's an experience. But what we're seeing, we're not seeing animals. We're seeing neurological representations of what it thinks animals could possibly be, based on the information.
Leaving the game reserve, and I saw this elephant coming to the car, and nobody else saw it. For me, that was very real.
That's right.
It is in your brain.
So this discussion will probably in an hour or so be completely gone from your mind, and you'll feel again, if you're not already, feeling that no, what you're really seeing is what's really out there. Things really do have colors. There are real sounds coming from things from Jackson's voice, and there really is a me in here who's watching all of this, because that's what your brain is producing you to think. It's producing you to think what I was describing is all bullshit. Because it's like, if it could talk to you, it'd say, Jackson, look it, we're doing the best we can, we're just trying to keep this organism alive, let it have sex, let it have children, let it raise the children, have nice social groups, it can go to movies, have plays, go on vacations, go on safaris and stuff, just leave it the fuck alone, Jackson. We're keeping that organism alive, we've been doing it for millions of years, just stop messing with this.
Who's talking? The brain?
The brain.
Mind.
The brain
Yes.
is saying to the Jackson identity that it also created.
In the movie that we're all projecting.
In the movie,
Simultaneously.
simultaneously. It's projected. But you see, we can sort of giggle and laugh and say, oh, that's kind of a cute idea. But I'm telling you, that's what it is. The sense of self, this self that's going to attain nirvana and through practices and so forth, it's just a stimulation of neurons in the brain. When those cease, that self that did all this work is just finished. It's like the whirlpool that stops whirling. Where did the whirlpool go? Or you blow out the candle and the flame is gone. Where does that flame show up again? That flame doesn't show up again. This self that's the self that's appearing to be in your mind, when the body dies, that self is gone because it's just neuronal activity on this hierarchy. And I don't want to give you any hope, because there's no hope at all for the me. Because the me is just on this hierarchy, just this neuronal activity, and when it ceases, there's no. A good example of this, here's another thing. I wrote a wonderful, well, I thought it was wonderful, because I was programmed to think it was wonderful. A piece on Alzheimer's and realization that in Alzheimer's it's a gradual falling away of all identity. You don't even remember who you are, let alone the people in your life. Face recognition is a very important function of the brain. And people who've had different strokes and tumors and brain injury, they can lose that part of the brain that normally is dealing with facial recognition. That can be suspended or permanently. The person cannot recognize the faces anymore. So it's not like, oh yes, I recognize you. No, it's a brain activity of relating through these kind of mirroring cells to be able to reflect on similar phenomena, faces and so forth, that are part of the milieu of a social situation, or a family, or a partner, those sort of things. That functioning can stop, and then you don't recognize people anymore. And maybe they can be offended. He doesn't remember me anymore. Which me? He doesn't remember anymore. And which he doesn't remember anymore. It's just those neurons aren't functioning.
Now, sorry, my reference is Buddhism mostly. You would say then the question is why would your continuum be manifesting your reality and mine a different reality? And I'm wondering in Dzogchen, is that an important question? Not really. Because, then you'd go on to say, okay, well, it's produced by the karmic seeds and some are positive, so produce positive karma and some negative karma. And therefore you have experiencing happiness or suffering, and that's quite an important part of Dharma. But I'm wondering in the Dzogchen practice, is that an important question? Or is it just all the same take, all the same positive, negative experiences? Just
Oh, you mean what they call namnid, same taste? Or rochik?
Same taste, yeah.
Same taste.
So that's my question. Is it?
The latter. So the self that we're talking about is completely just an activity of neuronal activity in the brain, a processing, generating a sense of self based on conditioning, DNA, and all of that. That's the sense of self that you feel you are. And if that part of the brain in Alzheimer's that creates your sense of identity of being Jackson or whoever you pretend to be, that ceases. And it doesn't get better. Normally it's a progressive disease and it gets worse. At first it phases and then out, phases, and then it's lost, and then it gets worse and worse and worse, and then you die. It isn't recovered upon death. You don't leave the body and all of a sudden it's all, oh, now I remember I was Jackson. No, because that entity was just neuronal activity. You don't recover that identity. Because there's no identity there to recover. It's just neuronal activity. There's no self in any of that to remember who it was. Because it was only the neuronal activity occurring.
Will that entity recognize if say that entity was a Buddhist, say for instance, and that person died of Alzheimer's, and that person has had a practice and would recognize Rikpa?
No, there's no person there to recognize
Well,
Rikpa.
on the death of the entity,
There is no entity that dies. All it is neuronal activity that gave the illusion of there being an entity stopped.
I have to ask a question.
What?
So when they see, Jackson, I drew it out of my head.
See, this is, I'm trying to point out emptiness on the hierarchy of the neurology. And then we can look at emptiness at the other hierarchies. And the news is equally bad. You don't find a self in any of
You
these
don't really
hierarchies.
lose the identity, self-identity in Alzheimer's until you're gorked out. So it could be a coma or anything else. So I don't know that that's necessarily the best example for people who know people with Alzheimer's in a moderate stage.
Well, I
Because they
think,
still have self-identity
Mattia,
at that
did
point.
Marcel lose his identity, her
And
ex-partner?
you can't
went to-
establish that they lost it. You can only see what you see. So I don't think
But I mean,
that's a good model.
was Marcel staying in touch with who he was, or did you sense that he didn't even realize who he was? He didn't realize who he was either.
Yeah.
She went through the whole thing with him and he died. And all I can say is the books that I've read currently on Alzheimer's it's indicative from the activity that the person does that they're no longer acting from the identity that they would normally do based on how they normally acted and what they would normally do and how they could relate to people. So it's just my experience, it's just meant to be a metaphor. It's not meant to be a medical precision of description. It's just used to be as an example for us that as these various functions of the brain fall away and fail, they don't come back in a progressive disease like that. And you don't at death then recover your identity and say, oh God, free of that body, now I remember who I was. That whole identity was just neuronal activity. And when it stops, that whole thing is gone. It's finished. There is no, in Buddhism, there is no continuation of a self. It's anatta. There's no self in anything. It's just all activity.
Well, by that, there wasn't a self before either.
No, there was never a self.
Right. So, but in terms of using the model where you're implying that there was kind of a self that was lost.
No,
so
no,
that you're
the
kind of
person
crossing
sense, the person, if you ask them, who are you?
You're just
they
asking,
won't-
if you're asking from the neurologically side.
If you, no, if you're
But the
asking,
other part, but the vision, yes.
If you're asking
Except
if-
that the lobe is not.
but I'm saying if you ask
brain,
the,
it's much
if
less.
you ask the person, let's say an advanced Alzheimer's case, very advanced, who they are, they won't be able to tell you their name.
Yeah, because they're not at a conversational level at that point.
Right, there's no sense of identity occurring in their mind. It's not.
Based on what? I mean, I'm not sure you can establish that with
No, no, it's-
based on.
It's a leap of
medical
faith.
science.
It's a
Right,
leap
right.
of faith.
So that's all I'm saying is you're giving us a viewpoint that this takes a leap of faith to say, let's presume that's true, that's fine.
But we could say any sense of identity is a production of brain activity. And all brain activity has a beginning and an end, and it's moving through. And when it ceases, anything that brain activity is producing ceases. So there is no self that's this identity that continues and reincarnates into another lifetime, that is a continuation of that neurologically produced self. It's the self that's watching the movie, or it's the self in your dreams that are being chased by tigers.
Didn't you give an example yesterday that with the neurodeath experience where there was no brain activity and the person felt like they were seeing the instruments that they were, they hadn't heard things, and at that time they still had a self-identity. And
It
the
gets-
story the way you told it.
It gets really interesting because as you start to get into these quantum levels, you get projections that are beyond the brain. And there's projecting process that isn't part of the neural, but that's a different hierarchy. We're gonna get to that hierarchy and what that is, but it's still no hope. Because there's no entity in anything. So if you take, this holds across all of the hierarchies. And that principle is from the Buddha, that anatta, meaning that there's no self-identity in any of the hierarchies. And there's no big self with a big S, or a God that's a self, that's an entity. That's just a projection of our own brain, of our own mind. Okay? So there is nowhere in Buddhism the possibility of any kind of continuation, because nothing has any duration. Everything is anicca, everything is impermanent. So there's nothing continuing. So neurologically, the one who is looking at this movie, you're all looking at a movie. And that movie is being produced in your brain, and the one who's looking at it is also being produced in your brain. Just like the person you seem to be in your dream at night. Otherwise, you're saying, well, no, I'm actually a soul, like a little soul demon kind of thing that's in there, and it's kind of a movie theater in there, right? And I'm kind of watching this movie as being this little eternal soul, this little Rigpa soul thing, and I'm watching this movie. But where is that taking place in there? Where is that occurring in there? Where is that movie playing? And where is the guy sitting in relationship to the movie? You have to look at this and see where it is. Where's the movie going on, and where's the little person in there that's watching it, and what is the status of that little person that's watching the movie? Is it an independently existing entity? Or is it a dependently originated entity, dependent upon neuronal activity, like the movie? Everything about this movie is dependent upon neuronal activity occurring within the perceptual systems and the occipital cortex that we're seeing is completely dependent on all of that activity. And we don't have any problem in neuroscience with that at all. But when we start looking at what is the one that's observing the movie, that gets really tricky in terms of being able to understand it neurologically, and then to even look at it spiritually, like Sam Harris. And his looking at this, he studied with Dilgo Khyentse. He studied with Tukul Urgyen in Nepal and received teachings and all of that. He had a vision before he went to see Dilgo Khyentse, of Dilgo Khyentse looking exactly like he did it. He'd never seen a picture of him before, and when he first met him, it was him. But he said then afterwards, well, maybe I was just imagining earlier the image I saw, and I changed it in my mind when I saw him. I mean, he was trying real hard to discredit any kind of higher powers of experience. But he had all of these various phenomena, and he said the one thing I can't figure out is like who's watching the movie, and where's the movie? And we talk about free will. He says, where could there be any entity in there that has free will? Where is in that neuronal activity that seems to be all the person could possibly be who's engaged in the movie? Where could there be a space for free will to be acting if it's only neuronal activity that is the self identity that's occurring? And so he wasn't able to come up with that. How could there be a little kind of soul entity in there that's watching the movie? How would that work? Where's the movie? Where's the movie in there? Because the movie is neurological. Yes?
I was just thinking, like, if I'm watching the movie and I don't really like it and I want to change it, so then what makes me change it? Is it
Nothing makes you change it because there's no you there. There's just the thought, I don't like the movie, is arising.
But then, like, if it's a habit, like, for example, you're using the alcoholic thing, and I think, well, I would like to change that habit.
The thoughts occur, I would like to change that habit. It's not that somebody is thinking that thought. Those thoughts are just occurring.
So then, what would be the purpose of life, the way right now?
Well, I think the human brain has to have purposes for stuff. Yeah.
So then there's so when the I goes away,
Yes.
then there's just Rigpa.
Yes.
Then Rigpa has its own, has something that causes it to manifest.
It's its own internal dynamics, which are the archetypes of bodhicitta.
Yeah.
So all of this is a play. This is bringing the higher hierarchies in. Is all a play of the bodhicitta.
The wee part of
The brain activity, neuronal activity, plant activity, all of this stuff is the Tsal of Rigpa manifesting. And as it's manifesting, it's all dependently originated.
And is it like evolving its bodhicitta awakening? So is it evolving to something, or is it just expanding? That's what I can't. And what role does this I, then this little this false I? I know it's for survival, but why did Rigpa manifest it like that?
Well, it's simply the nature of this is the nature of reality. That's its nature. To say why, what does that even mean?
Because then we know
See,
what direction to go into.
Why applies to like the human brain having cause and effect reasons for doing things. You ask, why are we doing this? But Rigpa is not in that category of a conceptual construction that has to have reasons for things, and it's not an entity that does things. It hasn't done anything. It hasn't done the expression of all of this. It hasn't done it. It's simply a luminous quality of that empty consciousness. It's not doing it. It's what it is.
It's potentiality, and then it's manifesting in different forms.
But the potentiality isn't any more manifest than it is as it was as a potential, because it's releasing upon the arising. It's never actually, everything is like a big miscarriage or an abortion. The upon the birth it dies. It dies upon the arising, it releases upon the arising. But so now we're starting to get into that next hierarchy, but I'm trying to establish the emptiness at the neurological level. And then we can look into the empty nature of the next hierarchy, which is the subtle body, where tonight we're going to do some practice with the Kundalini, bringing it up, making the crown chakra, third eye chakra more active. And they will produce a dimension that's beyond the neurology of the body, completely. There's a whole nother dimension that doesn't depend on the body. It's not dependent on the body.
In those dimensions, are they just projections?
Yes.
So can we ask the question differently? Who needs to watch the movie? What is the purpose of the movie?
Survival, and so you can have sex and reproduce.
So who needs to watch it then?
There is no one who needs to watch it.
You don't have to, you just want to.
It's just the brain is creating a you that thinks about having sex, reproducing, taking care of your children, and providing for that family unit and supporting your socially survival supporting entity.
Can I ask another question? If the true nature of Rigpa is bliss, would it be okay to think that it wants to increase the bliss? It's like the sun is shining, so it
Well,
lights us all.
isn't that what's manifesting here? You just want more bliss?